Greetings and salutations, dear viewers. Get ready for some fantastic content. We're thrilled to present to you our video dedicated to infidel. Enjoy. An infidel, literally unfaithful, is a person who is accused of disbelief in the central tenets of one's own religion, such as members of another religion, or irreligious people.See. Ginther 2009, the Westminster Handbook to Medieval Theology, Westminster. Quote, infidel literally means unfaithful, infidel. The American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language, 4th edition, Houghton Mifflin Company. An unbeliever with respect to a particular religion, especially Christianity or Islam. Infidel. Oxford Dictionaries, US 2011. Quote, a person who does not believe in religion or who adheres to a religion other than one's own. Infidel is an ecclesiastical term in Christianity around which the Church developed a body of theology that deals with the concept of infidelity, which makes a clear differentiation between those who were baptized and followed the teachings of the Church versus those who are outside the faith. Christians used the term infidel to describe those perceived as the enemies of Christianity. After the ancient world, the concept of otherness, an exclusionary notion of the outside by societies with more or less coherent cultural boundaries, became associated with the development of the monotheistic and prophetic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Pagan. In modern literature, the term infidel includes in its scope atheists, polytheists. Second Ward 2008, in Expressing Islam, Religious Life and Politics in Indonesia. Editors, Greg Feely, Sally White. Chapter, Alexander Ignatenko, Words and Deeds, Russia in Global Affairs, Vol. 7, No. 2, April June 2009, page 145. Animists, Heathens, and Pagans. Siminolo W. 2000, The Many Faces of Cosmopolis, Border Thinking and Critical Cosmopolitanism. Public Culture. A willingness to identify other religious people as infidels corresponds to a preference for orthodoxy over pluralism. See Cole and Hammond 1974, Religious Pluralism, Legal Development, and Societal Complexity, Rudimentary Forms of Civil Religion, Journal for the Scientific Study of Religion, Vol. 13, No. 2. Sullivan Kelvin. M. 1992, Religion and Liberal Democracy, The University of Chicago Law Review, Vol. 59, No. 1. In this section, we'll be peeling back the layers of etymology to reveal its true essence. The origins of the word infidel date to the late 15th century, deriving from the French infidel or Latin unfidelis, from in not plus fidelis faithful, from fids faith, related to fide to trust. The word originally denoted a person of a religion other than one's own, especially a Christian to a Muslim to a Christian, or a Gentile to a Jew. Later meanings in the 15th century include unbelieving, a non-Christian, and one who does not believe in religion. 1527. Let's transition to usage and uncover its significance. Christians historically used the term infidel to refer to people who actively opposed Christianity. This term became well established in English by sometime in the early 16th century, when Jews or Mohammedans, Muslims, formerly called Saracens, were described contemptuously as active opponents to Christianity. In Catholic dogma, an infidel is one who does not believe in the doctrine at all and is thus distinct from a heretic who has fallen away from true doctrine, that is, by denying the divinity of Jesus. Similarly, the ecclesiastical term was also used by the Methodist Church in reference to those without faith. Today, the usage of the term infidel has declined. The current preference is for the terms non-Christians and non-believers, persons without religious affiliations or beliefs, reflecting the commitment of mainstream Christian denominations to engage in dialogue with persons of other faiths. Nevertheless, some apologists have argued in favor of the term, stating that it does not come from a disrespectful perspective, but is similar to using the term orthodox for devout believers. Moreover, some translations of the Bible, including the King James Version, which is still in vogue today, employ the word infidel, while others have supplanted the term with non-believer. The term is found in two places. Our focus now turns to right to rule, an important aspect of our discussion. In Quod Super His, Innocent IV asked the question, is it licit to invade a land that infidels possess or which belongs to them? And held that while infidels had a right to dominion, right to rule themselves and choose their own governments, the Pope, as the Vicar of Christ, de jure possessed the care of their souls and had the right to politically intervene in their affairs if their ruler violated or allowed his subjects to violate a Christian and Eurocentric normative conception of natural law, such as sexual perversion or idolatry. He also held that he had an obligation to send missionaries to infidel lands, and that if they were prevented from entering or preaching, then the Pope was justified in dispatching Christian forces accompanied with missionaries to invade those lands. As Innocent stated simply, if the infidels do not obey, they ought to be compelled by the secular arm and war may be declared upon them by the Pope, and nobody else. This was, however, not a reciprocal right, and non-Christian missionaries, such as those of Muslims, could not be allowed to preach in Europe because they are in error and we are on a righteous path. A long line of papal hierocratic canonists, most notably those who adhered to Ullanus Anglicus's influential arguments of the crusading era, denied infidel dominion, and asserted Rome's universal jurisdictional authority over the earth, as well as the right to authorize pagan conquests solely on the basis of non-belief because of their rejection of the Christian God. In the extreme, the hierocratic canonical discourse of the mid-12th century, such as that espoused by Bernard of Clairvaux, the mystic leader of the Cistercians, legitimized German colonial expansion and practice of forceful Christianization in the Slavic territories as a holy war against the Wends, arguing that infidels should be killed wherever they posed a menace to Christians. When Frederick I unilaterally arrogated papal authority, he took on the mantle to destroy, convert, and subjugate all barbarian nations, a power in papal doctrine reserved for the Pope. Hostinses, a student of Innocent, in accord with Ullanus, also asserted, by law infidels should be subject to the faithful. John Wycliffe, regarded as the forefather of English Reformation, also held that valid dominion rested on a state of grace. The Teutonic Knights were one of the byproducts of this papal hierocratic and German discourse. After the Crusades in the Levant, they moved to crusading activities in the infidel Baltics. Their crusades against the Lithuanians and Poles, however, precipitated the Lithuanian controversy, and the Council of Constance, following the condemnation of Wycliffe, found Hostinus's views no longer acceptable and ruled against the Knights. Future church doctrine was then firmly aligned with Innocent's position. The later development of counter-arguments on the validity of papal authority, the rights of infidels, and the primacy of natural law led to various treatises such as those by Hugo Grotius, John Locke, Immanuel Kant, and Thomas Hobbes. Let's now turn our attention to colonization of the Americas and uncover the fascinating insights it brings to the table. During the Age of Discovery, papal bulls such as Romanus Pontifex and, more importantly, Intercaetera 1493, implicitly removed dominion from infidels and granted them to the Spanish Empire and Portugal with the charter of guaranteeing the safety of missionaries. Subsequent rejections of the bull by Protestant powers rejected the Pope's authority to exclude other Christian princes. As independent authorities, they drew up charters for their own colonial missions based on the temporal right for care of infidel souls in language echoing the Intercaetera. The charters and papal bulls would form the legal basis of future negotiations and consideration of claims as title deeds in the emerging law of nations during the period of European colonization. The rights bestowed by Romanus Pontifex and Intercaetera have never fallen from use, serving as the basis for legal arguments over the centuries. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in the 1823 case Johnson v. McIntosh that as a result of European discovery and assumption of ultimate dominion, Native Americans had only a right to occupancy of native lands, not the right of title. In the 1831 case Cherokee Nation v. Georgia, famously described Native American tribes as domestic dependent nations. In Worcester v. Georgia, the court ruled that the native tribes were sovereign entities to the extent that the U.S. federal government, and not individual states, had authority over their affairs. Native American groups, including the Taino and Onondaga, have called on the Vatican to revoke the bulls of 1452, 1453, and 1493. In the upcoming section, we'll be dissecting marriage and exploring its implications in greater detail. According to the Catholic Encyclopedia, the Catholic Church views marriage as forbidden and null when conducted between the faithful Christians and infidels, unless a dispensation has been granted. This is because marriage is a sacrament of the Catholic Church, which infidels are deemed incapable of receiving. With the groundwork laid, let's now examine as a philosophical tradition and its connections to our previous discussions. Some philosophers such as Thomas Paine, David Hume, George Holyoake, Charles Bradlaugh, Voltaire and Rousseau earned the label of infidel or freethinkers, both personally and for their respective traditions of thought because of their attacks on religion and opposition to the Church. They established and participated in a distinctly labeled infidel movement or tradition of thought that sought to reform their societies which were steeped in Christian thought, practice, laws and culture. The infidel tradition was distinct from parallel anti-Christian, skeptic or deist movements, in that it was anti-theistic and also synonymous with atheism. These traditions also sought to set up various independent model communities, as well as societies, whose traditions then gave rise to various other socio-political movements such as secularism in 1851, as well as developing close philosophical ties to some contemporary political movements such as socialism and the French Revolution. Towards the early 20th century, these movements sought to move away from the tag infidel because of its associated negative connotation in Christian thought, and there is attributed to George Holyoake the coining of the term secularism in an attempt to bridge the gap with other theist and Christian liberal reform movements. In 1793, Immanuel Kant's religion within the boundaries of mere reason reflected the Enlightenment period's philosophical development, one which differentiated between the moral and rational and substituted rational irrational for the original true believer infidel distinction. In this section, we'll be exploring implications for medieval civil law. Laws passed by the Catholic Church governed not just the laws between Christians and infidels in matters of religious affairs, but also civil affairs. They were prohibited from participating or aiding in infidel religious rites such as circumcisions or wearing images of non-Christian religious significance. In the early Middle Ages, based on the idea of the superiority of Christians to infidels, regulations came into place such as those forbidding Jews from possessing Christian slaves. The laws of the Decretals further forbade Christians from entering the service of Jews, for Christian women to act as their nurses or midwives, forbidding Christians from employing Jewish physicians when ill, restricting Jews to definite quarters of the towns into which they were admitted and to wear a dress by which they might be recognized. Later during the Victorian era, testimony of either self-declared or those accused of being infidels or atheists was not accepted in a court of law because it was felt that they had no moral imperative to not lie under oath because they did not believe in God or heaven and hell. These rules have now given way to modern legislation, and Catholics, in civil life, are no longer governed by ecclesiastical law. Get ready for an exciting part as we dive into Islam. One Arabic language analog to infidel, referring to non-Muslims, is kafir, sometimes kafir, kufr or kafir, kufr in Turkish, from the root kfr, which connotes covering or concealing. The term kfr may also refer to disbelief in something, ungrateful for something provided, or denunciation of a certain matter or lifestyle. Another term, sometimes used synonymously, is mushrik, polytheist or conspire, which more immediately connotes the worship of gods other than Allah. In the Quran, the term kafir is first applied to the unbelieving Meccans and their attempts to refute and revile Muhammad. Later, Muslims are ordered to keep apart from them and defend themselves from their attacks. In the Quran, the term people of the Book Al-Kitab refers to Jews, Christians, and Sabians. In this way, Islam considers Jews and Christians as followers of scriptures sent by God previously. The term people of the book was later expanded to include adherents of Zoroastrianism and Hinduism by Islamic rulers in Persia and India. In some verses of the Quran, particularly those recited after the Hijrah in AD 622, the concept of kafir was expanded upon, with Jews for disbelief in God's sign and killing prophets like Jesus, and Christians for believing the Trinity and that Jesus was the Son of God, which the Quran considers it to be idolatry. Some hadiths prohibit declaring a Muslim to be a kafir, but the term was nonetheless fairly frequent in the internal religious polemics of the age. For example, some texts of the Sunni sect of Islam include other sects of Islam such as Shia as infidel. Certain sects of Islam, such as Wahhabism, include as kafir those Muslims who undertake Sufi shrine pilgrimage and follow Shia teachings about imams. Similarly, in Africa and South Asia, certain sects of Islam such as Hausas, Ahmadi, Akbaris have been repeatedly declared as kufr or infidels by other sects of Muslims. The class of kafir also includes the category of murtad, variously translated as apostate or renegades, for whom classical jurisprudence prescribes death if they refuse to return to Islam. On the subject of ritual impurity of unbelievers, one finds a range of opinions, from the strictest to the most tolerant, in classical jurisprudence. Historically, the attitude toward unbelievers in Islam was determined more by socio-political conditions than by religious doctrine. A tolerance toward unbelievers prevailed even to the time of the Crusades, particularly with respect to the people of the book. However, animosity was nourished by repeated wars with unbelievers, and warfare between Safavid Persia and Ottoman Turkey brought about application of the term kafir even to Persians in Turkish fatwas. In Sufism the term underwent a special development, as in a well-known verse of Abu said, "So long as belief and unbelief are not perfectly equal, no man can be a true Muslim," which has prompted various explanations. Let's zoom in on Judaism and understand its implications. Judaism has a notion of pagan Gentiles who are called Akam, an acronym of Avi Kahavimu Mutzalof, or, literally, star and constellation worshippers. The Hebrew term, kafir, cognate with the Arabic kafir, is reserved only for apostate Jews. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications.